These rare and fascinating photos from World War II showcase pivotal moments from Nazis' involvement in Germany during the conflict. Welcome to Timeless Frames, where history is immortalized through unforgettable moments from the past. Let's start. Soviet Marines rest in Crimea, 1944. In this photograph, Soviet Marines are shown resting in Crimea in 1944. The image reflects the brief moments of respite amidst ongoing battles. Victory Anniversary in Stalingrad, 1944. This photograph marks the anniversary of the victory in the Battle of Stalingrad, celebrated in the city in 1944. It represents the resilience and spirit of Soviet victory. German prisoners march through Moscow, July 17, 1944. In this photograph, German prisoners of war, including 19 generals, march through Moscow on July 17, 1944. It represents the scale of Soviet triumph during World War II. Columns of German prisoners in Moscow, July 17, 1944. This image shows columns of German prisoners of war walking along the Garden Ring in Moscow on July 17, 1944. It highlights the Soviet victory and the humiliation of Nazi forces. Village residents tell Soviet liberators of hard life, Pskov region, 1944. In this photograph, residents of a village near Opochka share their experiences of life under German captivity with soldiers of the Second Baltic Front in June 1944. It reflects the horrors of occupation and the relief of liberation. Bucharest residents welcome Soviet troops, 1944. In this image, residents of Bucharest celebrate as Soviet troops enter the city on August 31, 1944. The photo captures the joy of liberation after years of Nazi occupation. Crowds celebrate Soviet entry into Sofia, Bulgaria, 1944. In this photograph, jubilant crowds in Sofia cheer the arrival of the Red Army in September 1944. It marks the end of German occupation in Bulgaria and the liberation of its people. Belgrade residents greet Soviet troops, 1944. In this image, residents of Belgrade greet Soviet soldiers entering the city on October 30, 1944. It captures the moment of freedom as Yugoslavia is liberated from Nazi control. Bialystok residents greet Red Army liberators, Poland, 1944. This photograph shows residents of Bialystok welcoming Red Army soldiers with flowers in July 1944. The scene reflects the gratitude of those liberated from German occupation. Soviet soldiers meet in Lublin, Poland, 1944. In this photograph, Soviet soldiers gather in the city of Lublin, Poland in 1944. It marks a significant step in the Red Army's advance through Eastern Europe. Soviet soldiers in Budapest, Hungary, 1945. In this image, Soviet soldiers patrol a district of liberated Budapest in 1945. It captures the presence of Soviet forces in Hungary following its liberation. Public celebration in Vienna, Austria, 1945. In this photograph, a public celebration marks the liberation of Vienna by Soviet troops in 1945. It reflects the triumph and joy of the city's residents. How did the people of Prague celebrate their liberation from Soviet forces in 1945? Let's see. Prague residents greet Marshal I.S. Konev, Czechoslovakia, 1945. This image shows residents of Prague greeting Marshal I.S. Konev in 1945, celebrating the liberation of Czechoslovakia by Soviet forces. Girls from Oriol region await return home, Kulm, Poland, 1945. In this photograph, girls from the Oriol region, formerly enslaved by the Germans, wait at a collection point in Kulm, Poland, in 1945. It captures the moment of freedom after years of hardship. Soviet soldier, holds Czech child, Prague, May 1945. In this photograph, a Soviet soldier holds a Czech child as the child examines the soldier's Order of Glory. It reflects the bond between liberators and civilians in Prague in May 1945. Mortar shop in Siberia, June 1945. This image shows workers in a mortar shop at a defense plant in Siberia in June 1945. It highlights the industrial efforts of the Soviet Union during the final stages of the war. Victorious smiles, women of war. This powerful image captures a group of decorated Soviet women soldiers, proudly posing in front of a military train during World War II. Their happy smiles show their strength and success, reminding us of the important role women played in the war. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, hero of the Soviet Union. This photograph shows Lyudmila Pavlichenko, a Soviet sniper with over 300 kills. It reflects her legendary status as a hero of the Soviet Union during World War II. I hope you are enjoying it. Just hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to view more videos like this. Maria Dolina, hero of the Soviet Union, 1943. This image shows Maria Dolina, a Soviet bomber pilot and hero of the Soviet Union, who carried out 72 combat sorties. She dropped 45 tons of bombs and shot down 3 enemy fighters. On the road to Berlin, 1945. In this photograph, Soviet soldiers march toward Berlin in 1945. It symbolizes the final push of the Red Army to capture the German capital. Artillery shells delivered to Königsberg, East Prussia, 1945. This image shows soldiers of Captain V. Leskov's battery delivering artillery shells on the approaches to Königsberg in 1945, a crucial battlefront during the war's final phase. Street battle on the outskirts of Königsberg, 1945. In this photograph, Soviet soldiers engage in street fighting on the outskirts of Königsberg in 1945. It shows the fierce resistance faced during the capture of the city. Soviet soldiers march past monument in Silesia, 1945. In this image, Soviet soldiers march past the monument where, according to legend, Andrei Kutuzov's heart was buried in Bunslau, Silesia in 1945. It reflects the symbolic victory of the Red Army. Soviet artillerymen write on shells, Germany, 1945. In this view, Soviet artillerymen wrote messages like "to Hitler," "to Berlin," and "to the Reichstag" on shells in 1945. It symbolizes the Soviet determination to take the heart of Nazi Germany. Soviet attack aircraft over Berlin, 1945. In this photograph, Soviet attack aircraft fly over Berlin in 1945. It captures the intensity of Soviet aerial bombardments during the final stages of the Battle of Berlin. Soviet soldier in front of signs in Berlin, May 1945. In this photograph, a Soviet soldier stands in front of signs in Berlin in May 1945. It marks the Soviet forces' victory and their arrival in the German capital. What does this powerful image reveal about the fierce battles in Königsberg during April 1945? Let's see this photo. Soviet artillerymen fight in Königsberg, April 1945. In this image, Soviet artillerymen engage in battle on Aveda Alley, now Alley of the Brave, in Königsberg in April 1945. The battle represents the intense fighting as the Red Army advanced further into East Prussia. Soviet soldiers rest on Spree River, Berlin, May 1945. In this image, Soviet soldiers rest on the banks of the Spree River in Berlin in May 1945. It marks a brief respite after the intense fighting during the Battle of Berlin. Gestapo building in Berlin, May 3, 1945. In this photograph, the Gestapo building in Berlin is shown on May 3, 1945. It marks the fall of Nazi authority in the German capital. Soviet soldiers fight for Berlin subway, 1945. In this image, Soviet soldiers fight for control of the Berlin subway system in 1945. The photograph captures the strategic importance of the city's underground passages during the battle. Maria Timofeevna Shalneva regulates movement near Reichstag, 1945. In this image, Maria Timofeevna Shalneva, a corporal, regulates the movement of military equipment near the Reichstag in Berlin in May 1945. It reflects the pivotal role of Soviet women in the war effort. Soviet soldiers with banner at Brandenburg Gate, 1945. In this photograph, a Soviet private and lieutenant pose with a banner in front of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin in 1945. It marks the victory of the Red Army in Berlin. Soviet soldier raises red flag over Reichstag, Berlin, 1945. In this image, a Soviet soldier raises the red flag over the Reichstag in Berlin in 1945. The photograph symbolizes the victory of the Soviet Union over Nazi Germany. Volodya Tarkovsky signs in the Reichstag, 1945. In this photograph, Volodya Tarkovsky signs a column in the Reichstag with the words Seversky Donets, Berlin. It reflects the pride and victory of the Soviet forces in capturing Berlin. Soviet command staff at the Reichstag, May 9, 1945. This image shows the command staff of the 88th Separate Guards Heavy Tank Regiment at the captured Reichstag in Berlin on May 9, 1945. It symbolizes the leadership and success of Soviet forces during the Berlin offensive. Reconnaissance Platoon of the 674th Rifle Regiment, 1945. This photograph shows members of the 674th Rifle Regiment's Reconnaissance Platoon, with Private Grigory Bulatov in the foreground. He was among the first to raise the red flag over the Reichstag. Soviet soldiers at Hitler's Globe, Berlin, 1945. In this photograph, Soviet soldiers are seen inspecting a globe used by Hitler in Berlin in 1945. The image reflects the symbolic conquest of Nazi authority. Soviet patrol in Berlin, June 5, 1945. In this photograph, a Soviet patrol walks along one of the streets of Berlin on June 5, 1945. It captures the calm after the storm of the Battle of Berlin. What does this moment of surrender reveal about the final days of Nazi Berlin in 1945? Let's see this photo. General Helmut Weidling surrenders to Soviet troops, Berlin, 1945. This photograph shows General Helmut Weidling, the last commander of Berlin's defense, surrendering to Soviet troops on May 2, 1945. It marks the official fall of Nazi defenses in Berlin. Victory celebration at Belorusky Station, Moscow, 1945. In this image, victorious Soviet soldiers arrive at Belorusky railway station in Moscow in 1945. The photograph captures the pride and joy of soldiers returning home after the war. Victory banner arrives at Moscow Airfield, 1945. In this photograph, soldiers carry the victory banner through the central Moscow airfield in June 1945. It symbolizes the triumph of the Soviet Union after defeating Nazi Germany. Victory Parade in Moscow, Red Square, June 24, 1945. In this photograph, a column of Red Army officers marches through Red Square with fallen fascist banners during the Victory Parade on June 24, 1945. It celebrates the defeat of Nazi Germany. Hitler Salute in Germany, October 1, 1938. This image shows a crowd in Germany during the 1930s raising their hands in the Hitler Salute. The sea of people reflects the widespread influence of Nazi propaganda at the time. Berlin Harvest Festival, January 1st, 1935. In this picture, Berlin is seen celebrating the Harvest Festival in 1935. The streets are filled with decorations, and people gather to honor the occasion with enthusiasm. Hitler Youth Camp near Nuremberg, October 1st, 1933. This photograph depicts a camp of the Hitler Youth near Nuremberg, with young boys preparing for activities. The scene highlights the regimented training and indoctrination of the youth during this period. German officers in conversation, January 1st, 1930. This image shows German officers engaged in a serious discussion, likely planning or strategizing. Their uniforms and demeanor reflect the militarized culture of the time. German parade with brass band, January 31st, 1942. In this picture, a German parade features a brass band marching in unison. The musicians, dressed in military attire, add a sense of grandeur to the event. German soldiers on parade, January 31st, 1942. This photograph captures German soldiers marching in formation during a parade. Their disciplined movements and uniforms symbolize the strength and order of the military. Officers opening a military bridge, January 31st, 1942. This image shows officers overseeing the opening of a military bridge. The strategic operation highlights the logistical efforts of the German forces during wartime. Reichstag saluting Hitler on Day of Anschluss, March 13, 1938. In this picture, members of the Reichstag are seen saluting Hitler during the celebration of the Anschluss. The event marks the annexation of Austria, showcasing the growing power of the Nazi regime. Ludwig Müller, December 31st, 1899. This portrait depicts Ludwig Müller, a prominent figure in the Nazi era. His stern expression and attire reflect his role as a key supporter of the regime's ideological agenda. Hitler Youth members, January 1st, 1939. This photograph captures a group of Hitler Youth members gathered for an event. Their uniforms and focused expressions highlight the regimented training and indoctrination of young individuals during this period. Thanks for watching. There's so much more to uncover, so be sure to subscribe, like, and share Timeless Frames for more amazing content. We'll see you soon.